Hi, my name is Al Getler, and welcome to another episode of Lead or Be Led. We are so happy you're here joining us for Web TV for Leaders. Again, as I remind you, spread the word. Tell folks about some of the great work we're doing. If you take a look at our library of videos, we have very, very good guests giving you excellent information, and today is no different. Joining us today is really an old friend of mine, and he is, not that he's old, but he's been a friend of mine for some time. He's also just a really wonderful guy who has so much experience. Let me tell you a bit about our guest. He has a background as a serial entrepreneur. He's had several businesses that have been very successful. He has done things in health and stress management that he can tell you a bit more about while when he joins us. He also is trained in theatrics. In fact, he's a trained theatrical stage fighter. So he has a very, very diverse background. All of this gives him a great sense of presence, a great sense of what it takes for a person, especially a business person, to send a message forward to people, both physically and through speech. He is also a trained John Maxwell leadership presenter, and so he has tons and tons of experience when it comes to presenting advice and ideas to leaders. So please welcome my guest, Dave Sollars. Hi, Dave.
Hello, Al.
Well, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
It is great having you here, Dave. Now, Dave, today we're going to talk about a subject that you raised, and I just think it's an awesome subject. You want to talk about executive presence, and please give me an idea of what that really means, executive presence.
Oh, thank you. So, in being a leader, you can't just share your ideas in your own head. Leaders have to put out a vision for everyone, have them understand on an emotional engagement, get buy-in, and then lead people through a process or guide them through a process. So your ability to effectively present your ideas and show up when you need to present ideas, present yourself, is really how a leader maximizes their strategic vision, leads people into change initiatives, or creates new ideation. It's through their ability to actually show up and have the right presence in front of others.
So is it along the lines of when that top executive walks into the room, you can almost feel his or her presence, that person has a certain poise, a certain way they carry themselves, a certain mannerism that really is what we're speaking about here when it comes to executive presence?
It is. That's right on target. When you hear about someone who's good at this, it usually involves many details that you've not seen or heard of, and they've not shared with you because they've embodied it. So they usually have a preparation practice. So they prepare themselves for every speech, not just understanding the content, but understanding the process it takes to get ready and understand the context that they're presenting in, the energy that you need, the focus that you need. It's the difference between being on stage or being in front of a camera. And you have to understand whether you're leading a board meeting or are you rolling out a new product in front of 1,000 employees. Or are you presenting a new idea in front of financial stakeholders? Each one of those has its own nuances, and a leader has to be prepared and be efficient at giving that message in the right way. That's sticky. You're absolutely right. There's something about their engagement that allows their message to penetrate our walls and understand long after they've left the building, there's an idea or a feeling that stays with us.
Well, Dave, now you have a theatrical background, some training in theater, and you and I, as probably many of our viewers understand what we're talking about when we talk about stage presence. So, from that theatrical background, what is an actor with stage presence and what is an actor without stage presence? And then when it comes to executive presence, how do we see the difference between one who has it and one who doesn't?
That's a great question, Al. I love that. I'm going to borrow that from you. When I first started acting, and I was on stage when I was 5, and I started thinking that acting was really just showing off, that taking an idea and getting in front of others, and if you're not particularly afraid all the time, you just jump up there and say some stuff, people clap their hands, and off you go. As I started going into an actor studio program and formal training, I soon realized that our job as an actor is to portray someone's passion, really to understand and portray their passion so eloquently and so thoughtfully and so congruent with our body and our mind and our words and our intention, the way that we walk and speak and move, so that that idea and that passion resonates with the audience. And that's when somebody who's really embodied this really gets it. And that means that they've become, as we know, a pinnacle leader where they've really integrated many of these aspects of themselves inside. They've probably had some coaching, some feedback, some awareness. We all have unconscious habits. The leaders who don't have this, and I can tell you that I was with one just yesterday. This is a very international leader, and he was talking to me about coaching. What he had is an unconscious habit. One of his habits was when he was thinking, he went into a thinking mode. Mm-hmm. What he would do is he would kind of scrunch up his face, and he'd kind of put his hand like this, and then he'd kind of look like this, and then his forehead would actually start to get red and spread to his temples. And then he would lean forward and ask a clarifying question. So we spoke for a while before he asked me, just in the short time that we've spoken, is there any feedback that you'd like to give me? And I said, I would like to ask if you're aware of something that I've seen, and I don't know what this means, but you can tell me. And he just said, oh, that's how I think. And I said, that's great. Everyone has a thinking posture, a thinking way, but I said, here's what it makes me feel as the first time meeting you. I feel like I've done something wrong. I feel like I'm being criticized or judged. I feel like I'm being scrutinized, and I feel defensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he said, oh, that's not what I mean at all. I'm really intrigued by what you're saying, and I'm thinking about it.
Isn't that fascinating? So there's a body language and a presence right away that puts you ill at ease. Let's move on to someone who is by nature an introverted person. There are leaders who just really, perhaps talent got them to where they are, perhaps being at the right place got them to where they are, perhaps, there's a multitude of reasons why leaders could end up where they are, and sometimes they mistakenly even end up where they are. But they find themselves as the leader, as the executive, and they really are an introvert. They're not interested in giving a presence. They actually want to kind of shrivel up and hide behind podiums most of the time and not be in the spotlight. So how do you transition someone who is by nature an introvert and give them a presence?
This reminds me of a gentleman that I met not long ago, and he is a leader in his company. He's an international leader of a division. He needs to show up with strength and confidence and actually lead many other divisions and departments for product rollouts and new product initiatives and product extension. One of the challenges that he's had is that he finds that people do not take him seriously, and he does not have the confidence because people don't see his knowledge and strength. They see his sort of, like you said, an introvert.
Right.
So what I did for him is I sat with him and I talked to him about what the actual content was, and it was clear that he was a master of his content. Then I talked to him about some of his most successful product rollout, and he gave me one that still is at the pinnacle of success for his company. And I said, do you ever tell that story? And he said, no, why should I? It already happened. And I said, well, let's talk about how you use that story. And I had him relate to me the story, the fine points of it, and his role in it. And I said, tell me a time when you were confident. Tell me a time when you were enthusiastic and exuberant about your content, about a win, a company win and your personal win. And then we related that to what he did. He had a meeting in an hour. I gave him 3 threshold stories that you could, one story that had 3 parts to it, that he could go into that meeting and start the meeting with power and confidence, looking people in the eye, which he wasn't used to. And I told him my grandfather said that's looking for pennies. And I said, what are you doing, boy, looking for pennies? And I said, don't look for pennies on the floor. I said, look them in the eye, take a step forward, ground yourself, and tell that story. Tell the story of the place that we're at now, and it reminds you of a place that we were 8 years ago, and we had success, and you did it, and we did it, and we're going to do it again.
That's great.
And those 3 places gave him the ability to look them in the eye and speak with confidence and have genuine smile, enthusiasm, and some outward gestures that made everyone feel comfortable in his presence and got the message across in a way that would inspire the many people that he actually leads in his organization.
That's great. That's great. Well, Dave, as we kind of wind down here, what I'd like you to do, if you could, is to kind of bundle this up for people who really want to work on their presence. If you can give us a few things as a leader we need to look at to really develop our executive presence and how we can steps we can work towards to get there, that would be a great service to our audience.
Be happy to. I think the first thing is to be solid in your content. People who are not off script, that's an actor's term that you and I are familiar with. People who are trying to deliver PowerPoint presentations or other presentations and they do not have their content down solid, they are at risk for taking on some unconscious habits. So that's first. Okay. You'd be surprised how many people don't get off script.
And you mentioned 2 PowerPoints, which of course is something that can either make a person's presence or ruin a person's presence simply by the difference between referring to a slide or reading off a slide, correct?
That's exactly right. The PowerPoint should just be a slight reminder, and I'm not a big fan of many, many slides and dense PowerPoint.
Right. So executives should avoid, third quarter numbers with tiny little blah, 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 and then lots of words. Go with an image and go with something strong and then use the presence to sell that.
Best executive presence story is we talked to somebody who had a great quarter. They wanted to share it. They had had very dense slides and dense conversations where the punchline was, we did it. I said, walk out there, look them in the eye and say, throw up your arms and say, we did it. And I said, they can read about the rest.
There you go. Good. So what else? What else should they be thinking about?
So you also want to think about how you're carrying yourself. You're looking for incongruency. So if you're excited, but you don't get feedback that you're excited because you haven't given yourself permission to be genuinely excited with a smile, with the look in your eyes, how you carry yourself, look for these unconscious incongruencies that show up in your personality.
Okay.
Also look for the range of your voice. Monotone is going to put people to sleep.
Right.
When it's appropriate, look for places in your presentation where you can actually alter the pace, the volume, and also your level of excitement.
Gotcha. All right.
So use your vocals, use how you show up physically in your posture, and also have a body posture that really is key to what you're trying to say.
Gotcha. Now, Dave, when you think of a leader or executive that kind of personifies that, someone that's pretty well known, I might be putting you on the spot here, but who comes to mind that kind of has all this?
There's a lot of people that have all of that. I mean, when you talk about a relaxed sense, you mentioned before with John Maxwell, John is very good at this. He's got a cadence that's Central Ohio that is my cadence. I sort of look at that comfort and presence and ease that comes from decades of integrating a certain way of being. He allows himself to be funny and foolish, which excites his audience appropriately, and then he knows when to stop and slow down and make a point and then ramp it back up into a funny story.
Right. That's exactly what we like to see in a leader, and it's someone who keeps us engaged and really does have that presence that presents, to us what an executive really personifies and what we hope to see in an executive. Well, Dave, as always, when I'm in your presence, I learn a ton, and today I learned a lot about executive presence and the things that I need to think about. So tell our audience, Dave, if they want to know more about Dave Sollars, where do they go?
They can go to davidsollars.com and they can see the Protagonist Consulting Group that does this work that we're speaking about today.
Well, that about wraps up another episode of Leader Be Led. Dave Sollars had so much great information for us. And I'll tell you what, if you enjoyed what you heard, take that link and forward it on to your friends, and they too can learn from Dave Sollars about executive presence. I also want you to comment below here on the website that you're on right now or on YouTube. Tell us what you think, give us suggestions, and certainly tell us who you'd like to see as future guests on Leader Be Led. With that, I want to thank you for joining us and come back soon on another episode of Lead or Be Led. Take care.